a little song we say to welcome our guests. Come on, y'all sing it. Glad you came. Glad you came to be a part of my fellowship. To experience this awesome move of God. This awesome move of God. There's a river that still flows. The right feeling for your soul. Come on, say.
Are you looking for something meaningful and life-changing to help you move through the challenges of life? For the next 25 minutes, then, join Bishop John A. McCullough II and the Friendship Christian Church of Gastonia for an inspirational message prepared just for you.
Listen, everybody, you take your seat. Everybody has advice for your situation. Everybody seems to have a word for whatever you're dealing with. Everybody wants to make some suggestion about what you should or should not do. And sometimes the advice is good advice, and sometimes the advice is bad. Sometimes the advice is wise, and sometimes the advice is unwise. For believers, for those who are Christians, we have to determine how whatever the advice that we've been given, how does it impact me, first of all, spiritually, and then how does it impact my life and my walk as a child of God? Because whatever affects me spiritually has impact on every other aspect of my being. And so whenever somebody gives advice, I need to analyze where it's coming from and its purpose, and if this is something that I need to adhere to or something that I need to dismiss. Now, in the text, we find a situation where David, who was one of the greatest kings to have lived during the Bible time, David was in a situation where he was fighting a great challenge. And Saul, who was the current king, became outraged with David because David, you remember, was the shepherd boy who came to the battlefield one day, and there was a giant by the name of Goliath who was shouting insults at the army of God, and none of the men would fight Goliath. And David stepped forward and fought Goliath and was victorious. And you know, after that, he gained all kinds of notoriety. They put his name in all the newspapers, and he was on all the talk shows, and he was interviewed by Barbara Walters and everybody else. And so Saul now gets upset, and Saul hears them shouting. The people are singing the song that Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. And so hip, hip, hooray for David. And Saul became jealous. And now Saul is after David to destroy David's life. And so we open the text here, Psalm 11 and verse 1. David is responding to some advice that he was given. And he says, "In the Lord I put my trust." All right. He said, in God, I'm going to put my confidence. And so he responds. The New Living Translation says, I trust in the Lord for my protection. And then he goes on and he says, why? As he's asking the one who's giving him advice, he says, how is it that you can even say to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? And in other words, he's saying, why are you advising me to fly like a bird and to get away to safety? Why are you giving me this advice? Why are you giving me these instructions? And then we discover in verse number 2 that the one that was giving David the advice seems to respond as to why he said to David, you need to run because Saul is after you. He says, for look, the wicked bend their bow. He's speaking about Saul. They make ready their arrow on the string, that they may shoot secretly at the upright in heart. And then he says, besides, if the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? And so the one who is giving the advice says that you got to know, David, that the one who's trying to destroy you is already sharpening up his arrows. He's already practicing on the bow, and he's been shooting at targets, and he's not going to try to get you in the open. He's going to try to catch you in the shadows. He's going to shoot secretly at you. And so he says that when that happens, when the foundations are being destroyed, what can the righteous do? And he says, in other words, that we know that Saul and the righteousness of Saul had already dissipated. Saul had already begun to use tactics that were ungodly. He had a mindset that was not of God. And so the advisor thought he was giving David good advice when he said, listen, you got to know that when you're trying to do right, when you're trying to live right, or when you're trying to do what God said, there will be people who will shoot at you secretly and come against you. And so you got to run. And David responded, said, no, I'm not running because I trust in God. And so he said, what shall the righteous do? And do you not know that that same question is relevant today as we think about all of the things that have launched attacks on the strength and the health and the well-being of the family and the family structure? And so the writer says they are shooting arrows from shadows. In other words, they are trying to subtly do things that will bring destruction to the family. And so when we think about what David faced and what we face even today, we got to recognize then that we need to take advice that David took and realize that as we're trying to have strong families, there are arrows that have been released.
Many of the arrows that have been released to come and attack our families, to try and come against the structure of what our families are built upon, actually align with those 7 mountains of influence that we have studied previously. So when we talk about the 7 mountains of influence, these are the 7 areas that we want to be mindful that we are going to not allow the enemy to catch us unaware, because we need to be in tune with how the enemy will suddenly try to attack us with these secret arrows. So they're coming through these influences, and many of us are not aware. So the arrows are shooting towards the family structure, trying to take our families out. And this year, 2014, we want to make sure that we are aware of everything that the enemy is going to try to use to destroy our family. Do you want to know? So one arrow that's coming towards our family is media. Everybody say media. When we're talking about media and how media is shooting at our families, trying to take our families out, we could cover a number of things, but we want to look at just a few for today. One area in media would be computerized games, the technology computerized games. Now, gaming is okay. A lot of people game, not just little people, grown people, all of that. But don't get caught unaware as to how those games could negatively impact your families. There is a direct correlation between violent video games and aggressive behavior. A direct correlation. Go back and look at your research and look at it. Games like Grand Theft Auto and some of the others that are portraying violence, that are portraying guns and weapons and shooting and killing and running from the police and driving fast and all of that. Those are things that the enemy uses to subtly come into our lives, into our minds, into our psyches, and have us acting crazy, and we don't even know why. There was, Bishop, if you would tell the story about the young man that was playing the video game.
Right, over in Charlotte, some of you, probably a couple of years ago, I don't know the name of the game, but he was in the middle of the game, and it was a game, I guess, about warfare and shooting, and must have had something to do with police. He stopped playing the game, went outside at the apartment complex, and put a pistol to the police head and shot and killed them. And it was all because he had gotten caught up, and he could not separate reality and fantasy and so forth. And there are a lot of people that are not aware how much we're being influenced by media and all of the various mediums, whether it's print, whether it's video, songs, or whatever. We got to realize there are television programs that are directly set to promote illicit sexual behavior, and they want to capture us through the gates of our eyes, through the gates of our ears. We understand that, listen, there are programs and things that you can't even get through the program without a whole lot of vulgarities, and they make vulgarities appealing, and we have our young people that are being impacted by this, and we don't realize how it is coming into our families and so forth, and they're glamorizing disrespect and some of those things, all because of the arrow of the media that's being shot as they continue to promote things that don't line up with the Word of God, don't line up with what we are believing. And the sad scenario is that people who are Christians want to somehow still buy into that and feel like it will not affect us. But you got to know that, come on, guys, you know, you are human. And guys, you know, we get our minds, when we see things, it begins to impact us. And you cannot continue to watch adultery and sexuality and have naked women and so forth on programming and videos and it not have some impact on you. That's come right. On, somebody. That's right. All right. And so the argument is that I can look at programs that promote sexuality, adultery, fornication, homosexuality, and it's just a program. They argue on Facebook. They argue on Twitter. There are talk shows that argue as to whether or not we can absorb it and yet dismiss it. But the truth is that it begins to affect us. And listen, you start looking, as you said this morning, we start looking at each other.
We start looking at a lot of the sexuality, the lust, and all of those things that we're allowing to come into our eye gaze and our ear gaze, and we're not even aware that we'll go home to our spouses and then try to figure out why they're not performing like they're doing on TV. Then you somewhere mad because she can't hang from the chandelier. So we've got to go back and talk about, well, why is our passion not like Olivia and what's the president's name? Y'all know him. Fizz. Yeah, we start saying, why is our bedroom passion not like that? Because we have allowed ourselves to get tainted with stuff that's not even real, and then we want to bring it into our real lives, and it ends up impacting our families. So we've got to make sure that we are aware of what's going on and what the enemy is using. It's all to destroy the structure of the family, okay? Another arrow that's thrown towards the family structure is arts and entertainment. Arts and entertainment. What are we using within our families to entertain us? Not just the video games and the TV, but what other things? We could be talking about movies, we're talking about concerts, we're talking about whatever your other things are that are entertaining you. Are they taking you off course? Whatever it is, if it's interfering with your family time, if it's interfering with the time that you need to be spending with your spouse and with your children, then the enemy is being successful, because that's what his desire is to do anyway. And then even when we go into movies and places, we've got to make sure, are we being representative as to who we are as children of God? Bishop and I went to a jazz concert over in Charlotte. It's been several years ago, and I used to be a jazz buff. Used to love jazz music. My daddy used to love jazz, and he kind of introduced it, and it just kind of stayed there. And when I went to college, I had everybody that was a jazz. Al Jarreau was my man. Next to Bishop was Al Jarreau. So, I really love jazz. So we went to a concert. I think I probably talked him into going. And so we went into the place and we went there and just wanted to hear some jazz music. And literally while we were there, and we made everybody uncomfortable. People were looking like, why are y'all here? So, and what we took away from that was, the word says, if eating meat offends my brother, then I won't eat meat. So we were offending people because they felt like we shouldn't be there. So we've got to be careful, not just what we do, but what everybody else sees us doing. Okay, now, was going to the concert going to send anybody to hell? But if I was going to miss somebody seeing Jesus because we were sitting there, it was time to go. Tell somebody it's time to go. So that's what we did as they started drinking and they saw us seeing them with all their drinks and they trying to hide them from us. We say, let's go. So that's what we did. We left. But we've got to be careful even with arts and entertainment, what we're allowing to come into us and what we are putting out to others.
Well, arts and entertainment, you think about the artist, all right? The people who are singing, producing, what are they composing? What are these words? What's the power in words? We say it all the time. There's life and death are in the power of the tongue. And we sit and we listen, we absorb. Some of y'all remember not long ago when we had a singles event and we put up a video and this young lady was really spitting out words about how Christians don't need to listen to secular music. And boy, that erupted such a discussion, a heated discussion, because we want to be able to partake in Jay-Z. We want to be able to partake in everybody else. We want to be a part of Christianity, but we still feel like we don't want to be too saved. And if I got to cut out all of that, then I don't know if I really want this. And it's bringing destruction, it's wreaking havoc in our families. And let me tell you something, when somebody is not promoting the things you're in agreement with, you bringing chaos even into your own existence. And it will impact you. So we make sometimes our idols and the people that we love to adore, they are people that don't represent, as a matter of fact, they hate the God that you serve. They hate the God that you serve. Now, would you go and just stay with people, hang with people, listen to what they're saying if they're always talking about your mama or your daddy, if they're always putting your people down, if they're always talking about they're discrediting who your folk are? Is that who I'm going to go and entertain me, speak into me, and I help make them rich buying their thing? Arts and entertainment, arts can take you into places and influence your mind, whether it's dance art, whether it's rap, whether it's music. And listen, music is just a vehicle to get a message across. All right, to get words, an agenda. And so it's not that rap is bad. It's not that whatever genre is bad. It's what the lyrics are promoting and suggesting where we have our issue.
And not just the lyrics, Bishop, but even as you indicated, a lot of the moves and the gyrating, and I forgot what other word, twerking. What is it? Twerking. Not all of that. See, we'll look at it as, hey, it's no big deal. It's just entertainment. But wait until they solicit our daughter to do it. Right. Then we got a problem.
Or you see your little 4-year-old somewhere.
Your 4-year-old somewhere doing it. Then all of a sudden you're ready to snatch a crook in her. But where did she get it? Who taught her? Who exposed her? Right. And it's the same thing even at our home with our children. We want our children to be so well behaved and we want them to follow the rules. But who exposed them to all of that stuff? Who exposed them to all of that cussing somebody out? Who exposed them? Then when they turn around and do it on us, we're ready to beat them. Well, you brought it in the house. So we've got to make sure that we are not unaware of how we're letting the enemy subtly come in and just attack our families.
And the thing is that when these arrows are being shot and they are subtle and their messages, just don't be surprised now. If we want what the world has so much so, we're willing to risk our walk with God, our spirituality, our next generation. Don't be surprised. Don't be so confused as to why there's turmoil, why you got issues and problems, because we allow it to come in. So when it does what it's supposed to do, don't be surprised. Don't be mad with anybody. Argue your point that yes, I can listen to who I want to. Yes, I can buy what I want. Argue that point. Just don't get upset when it manifests in your household.
Right. Just don't be surprised. The next point that we want to look at is another arrow that's coming to our families, that's trying to attack us, and if we're not careful, we'll miss it. And that is the attack of the era of government. Government. Now, you all think, oh, well, the government, the government's for everybody. Don't be fooled. The government is not for everybody. The government, in many instances, is trying to keep some people down. So we've got to make sure we are aware. The government has passed many laws that will impact our families. When we look even financially at how many of us parents in here have been accustomed to filing our taxes and using our children as tax exempts, and we look forward to that helping us with our income tax check. Just raise your hand if you've ever claim your children, and that helps you on your taxes, right? Well, guess what? The government's messed with it, and some of us don't even know it. When it's time to go do taxes in 2014, you won't even be able to make those exemptions, those claims. So, many of us don't even know. So that's one way that the government can just mess with your finances, mess with the structure of our families. We've got to be aware of what's going on. Then we know that the government has definitely endorsed or put rules and laws in place for same-sex marriage. And many people will say, well, whatever they do, that's them. It doesn't bother me. But if you are of the righteousness of God, it ought to bother you because it goes against the word that we believe. Do we believe that? So it ought to bother us. So, I was looking at a show on TV this week, and the pastor was talking about how one athlete, a professional athlete, came out of the closet and simply said, I'm gay. I'm coming out of the closet. I'm letting everybody know that I'm gay. And then he received a congratulatory phone call from the president of the United States, that the president called and said, congratulations for coming out of the closet. Now, I processed that in my mind because I'm thinking, you're the president. Why? First of all, where do you have time to care about anybody's sexual preference? That's the first thing. But then to take the time to pick up a phone to congratulate somebody about coming out of the closet. And then we also have Tim Tebow, who's a Christian and professed his Christianity and took a stand for who he was. And then he was ridiculed by many of the people in the NFL for taking a Christian stand. So when you look at the fact that we've got the Christian being ridiculed, but we've got somebody that says, I'm coming out of the closet and let everybody know I'm gay, and he gets a pat on the back from the president, we are in trouble. Tell somebody that's a government in trouble. So, that there are issues that we need to be mindful of, and all of this is simply to impact the structure of the family. Y'all know 2 men can't make no baby. Amen. 2 women can't make a baby. The word talks about Adam and Eve, isn't that right? Not Adam and Steve, not Eve and Yvette. Right is right and wrong is wrong. I love you, I love you, I love you, and I will still, I'll minister to you all the way. But right is right and wrong is wrong. So we've got to make sure that we don't allow the government.
Praise God.
Praise God.
The arrows that the government continues to shoot, you got to recognize government is not government without governing people.
Right.
It's the people.
It's governing
all right?
us.
They have an agenda. They're real people who are making decisions, and they're making decisions that will impact the family. They're making decisions, of course. Everybody's talking about pro-life versus pro-choice and so forth. And the government passes laws trying to make sure that everybody has the right for abortions. Abortions are available, and without teaching righteousness and trying to instruct young people what to do is right, let's just say, well, if they mess up, then they will, they got to deal with the child. All right. The government said if they mess up and they get pregnant, just do away with the baby. They have determined when life begins. All right. And so we have families that are being impacted. I don't know. I didn't hear him say it, but I was reading an article where it said that the president said that if his daughter made an indiscretion, he didn't want her to be punished with a baby. Now, that's major, all right? That's major, all right? That it's punishment now with a baby when she ought to be able to just go and get an abortion. That's impacting life. That's impacting families, and we got to see that. And also, we have the laws that are being passed that make family living difficult, all right? That make being a father obsolete, all right? Don't hold them responsible or accountable, and make it where you can get better benefits if the father is not married to the mother. All right? These things impact the family as God has ordained and designed it. And those are arrows that are being shot to deteriorate the health of the family.
Okay, another arrow that's coming towards family to interfere with our foundation, with our structure, is education. Education. When we look at it, we want to understand that our educational system has been impacted, and as people of God, we need to be aware so that we'll be able to address some things and take some hard stands. When we look at education, when we look at our child care, many of you can attest that vouchers have been messed with, money has been cut, children are no longer receiving that education that they were able to get. The More at 4 program for our 4-year-olds, that program funding was interfered with. So therefore, the children that needed it the most are the children that are not going to be able to get a lot of these programs to help prepare them educationally. Then when we look at getting into school, the children that are not kindergarten ready will come to school already behind. So they'll be behind those whose parents had that $1,000, $1,200 a month to maybe pay for daycare. They're already going to be behind. So when those children get in school, they're going to be behind, and then it's going to be harder for them to get caught up and to be where they need to be. Teachers are not being paid the salaries that they deserve, so therefore you have some of the brightest that are pulling out of education going somewhere else, so you have people that will become educating our children that may not be the most qualified. So our educational system is being impacted, and we're somewhere don't even know what's going on with our mouths closed. We've got to make sure that we're aware, even at the college level. When we're talking about the going into college, nowadays, if you don't have some good credit or some good money, it's going to be tough to be able to get your college education. When I was in school 1,000 years ago, I went on a grant, SEOG and grants and things, and my parents had to subsidize a grant. Those grants aren't there anymore. So now what we have is that you may have to get loans that will put you deep in the whole student. Anybody want to say student loan?
If you're looking for dynamic worship, inspirational teaching, and a friendly atmosphere, you can visit us on Sundays at 221 West Bradley Street in Gastonia, North Carolina. For more information about our ministry, you can call 704-865-9016. To order your personal copy of today's message or any other broadcast, please call 704-865-9016 and indicate the broadcast date. Or you can just visit us online at www.friendshipgastonia.com. Thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast with Bishop John A. McCullough II and the Friendship Christian Church. Make sure you join us next week at the same time. And remember, let God take control and let the Spirit flow.